Hello there, welcome to ITV News Meridian.
Tonight's headlines. We're live in France tonight, where desperate refugees from Ukraine are trying to get to the southeast.
My house is destroyed. So what can I do?
Here, fuel prices hit the £2 mark. On the A2 near Canterbury, £2.06 for diesel, spotted by one viewer.
Farmers tell us why restrictions on pesticides and herbicides here mean we're having to import more food from abroad.
And 80,000 reasons to smile. We're at Mitchell Priory near Helsham, where the daffodils are out in force. Good evening. Ukrainian refugees who have travelled thousands of miles to safety have been telling ITV News Meridian of the devastation they've left behind and the frustration that they're still unable to get to family in the southeast.
After days of pressure, the government has announced a relaxation of the visa rules, but they don't come into force until next Tuesday.
Well, our reporter Joe Koshan joins us live from near Lille. Joe, there was due to be a visa processing centre where you are. Problems, though, we understand with that. What's happening? What's the latest?
Yes, Matt, I'd love to be able to give you some answers here tonight. I can't, I'm afraid, because I don't know where it is. Nobody does. None of the aid workers working here at one of the hostels that are looking after Ukrainian refugees know where it is. They've told me that they don't think it exists at all. There were promises, as we'd heard earlier in the week, of this pop-up centre to allow Ukrainian refugees to process their visa applications in Lille. But now we're hearing that they're being told to go to Paris instead. So the only ones that are being processed are the ones deemed vulnerable by the Home Office. Now, the question many people will be asking at home tonight is who isn't deemed vulnerable when fleeing a conflict. Now, as I say, the people I've been speaking to today, they're all in fight or flight mode, lacking sleep, don't quite know where to turn to right now. And it appears tonight in France, they're being given the runaround. Finding a new home is tiring, but 2.5-year-old Simone doesn't know the full extent of why he had to leave his old one in Kharkiv. This is why. Russian missiles continuing to demolish Ukrainian cities piece by piece. Sergei and his family had no choice.
Just a couple of days ago, it's starting in the morning is bombs and bombs shooting and troops starting to completely destroyed our city. So we wake up in the morning, keep our hands, keep for what they see, just close to me, just some documents, some what I see, and jump in a car and fly away.
Have you slept much?
Nah. Just the last 24 hours, 2-3 hours sleeping on the way, just in a car. All eastern Ukraine destroyed, absolutely destroyed. Nothing, no roads, no houses, nothing. No community.
No home to go back to?
No.
So
my house is destroyed. So what can I do?
Sergei has permanent residency in the UK, but his family do not. They have started their visa applications here at the port of Calais so they can travel to Kent, but are now waiting to be taken by coach back to Lille, some 70 miles away, to finish them off.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for this.
However, from next week, the Home Secretary has promised an easier process.
In short, Ukrainians with passports will be able to get permission to come here fully online from wherever they are and will be able to give their biometrics once in Britain.
That comes as little comfort to those already here waiting. Claire runs refugee charity Care for Calais. She says it's been near impossible to advise Ukrainian families where to go.
What's the point of having an online scheme if you then have to go for an in-person appointment? And there's been so many problems with the in-person appointments, hasn't there? I guess the question is, will it happen? How will it work? Will it work? Is it going to arrive in time? We just want to help people. We work with refugees. We understand how scared, confused and tired they are, and we just want to help them and reassure them. But it's really hard to reassure them when we don't have answers, when things keep changing.
It's another anxious night in a hostel for Sergei's family and many others waiting for their visas. But they say even if they're not sure where they'll end up, it's safer than where they've come from.
Well, Joe, we heard from the Home Secretary in your report there, but some of our MPs in the South East somewhat critical of their own government's response to the refugee crisis.
That's right, Matt. North Thanet MP Sir Roger Gale hasn't minced his words in what he thought of a statement earlier in the week promising a pop-up visa centre in Calais, which proved to be not true. Let's see if he still thinks that we called for her resignation. Let's see if he still believes that should be the case. He joins us here outside Roubaix now. So, Roger, from what you've seen today, you've spoken to Ukrainian families and aid workers yourself. Do you still think Priti Patel should resign of how she's dealt with this crisis?
First of all, I think we've made some major steps forward today. About 40 of us met with Michael Gove last night, and virtually all of us said we wanted the biometric processing to be done in England. It looks as though that's now going to happen, so that's a step forward. The team in Calais, the Border Force team, I think are doing as sympathetic and as humanitarian a job as they are being allowed to do. They're taking some details, they're getting people into the system, but those people are then being sent back to Lille for their biometric testing. Now, we don't know. We've asked lots of people. Nobody seems to think that there is actually a biometric testing system here. We're told there might be another one in Arras tomorrow, but in the meantime, people with no money are being sent to Paris, so there's still a lot of work to do.
Is there a will of your government to help these refugees, or are you being persuaded by public opinion right now?
I think there's a huge amount of goodwill on both sides of the House of Commons on the backbenches. We want to help. We want to be humane. We want to get as many of these people fleeing from the most terrible circumstances into the United Kingdom, and we want to look after them. And what we're all trying to do is persuade the government that they've got to go further and faster to do that.
Further and faster, this online scheme coming into play on Tuesday, we expect. Does that go far enough, and is it soon enough from what you've seen and who you've spoken to today?
Well, for the people who are here, and I've been inside this hotel, I've spoken to the refugees, and I've spoken to some of the refugees at Calais. They are exhausted. They're terrified. They want somewhere to call home. So for them, nothing is fast enough. And the young lady that I spoke to in there has got only one friend left with her. That's her cat. And somehow we've got to make accommodation for that as well. There is an enormous amount of work still to do.
So, Roger Gale, thanks ever so much for being with us this evening. And on that point of trying to find somewhere to live now, it's important to note that these Ukrainian refugees, that everyone I've spoken to today, they don't see that the offers of spare rooms in the southeast as a permanent home. If they had the option, they wouldn't have left their last home. But right now, they've got no other choice but to find somewhere new.
OK, Joe, for the time being, thank you very much indeed.
In other news, the cost of living has been addressed in Parliament by a food campaigner from Southend. Jack Monroe told MPs children in particular were suffering with poor diet and inadequate food. She made her remarks amid warnings the Russian invasion of Ukraine will lead to higher supermarket prices. She said real attempts have to be made to help working class people and families of the unemployed.
There are millions of children living in poverty in Britain today, and their home situations and their families' financial situations are already untenable and have been becoming increasingly untenable over the last decade. And the impact of the cost of living crisis on those households is going to be, in some cases, fatal, and that's not a term that I use lightly.
The NHS Ambulance Trust covering Kent and Sussex has moved to its highest state of alert because of extreme pressure on its frontline teams. South East Coast Ambulance Service says some patients are waiting longer than usual while it prioritises the most seriously ill. It says the public can help by not calling 999 unless facing a serious emergency.
Last night we featured the rise in fuel prices on forecourts across Kent and Sussex.
Well, at one filling station in Bearsted near Maidstone, diesel was getting close to £2 a litre, unleaded not far behind. There were predictions that the war in Ukraine, as it goes on, sanctions against Russia continue and take hold. It could get even higher, and it didn't take long for that to happen.
One haulier saw prices at a filling station on the A2 near Canterbury, £2.6 a litre for diesel. A short while ago, the diesel price fell back to a still eye-watering £1.99 a litre, with unleaded at £1.82.
Well, let's talk to motoring presenter and journalist Quentin Wilson for more on this. Quentin, eye-watering fuel prices here and rising. Do you expect it to get even worse?
Sadly, I'm afraid it will. The Ukraine has sent shockwaves through all the markets, not least the oil market and the constraints with the supply from Russia. So we will be looking at over £2. And the gloomiest predictions are a barrel of oil is, I think, $126 today, dollars. Some people are saying that by the summer it could get to 200 or over, which means that we could be spending an awful lot of our disposable income, far too much, on filling up our cars. So the Chancellor needs to do something and step in. I've been instrumental in keeping duty down for the last 12 years, but fuel duty has to go down even further now, and he needs to cut it just to support household incomes and the economy.
So let's get to what maybe drivers can do. Obviously, it might be cutting down the journeys if that's possible in terms of recreational journeys. But if you're a taxi driver or you work for yourself, that's not possible. So are there any ways that people can mitigate the fuel that they're using?
Yeah, just drive more carefully, slowly, progressively. Don't stab at the pedals like a prize fighter. Get into a higher gear as possible. And if you see the traffic lights changing up ahead, back off the throttle. Don't dive at the traffic lights and then brake, because if you brake, you're destroying the energy that you've just created. Keep the air conditioning off and the heating off and all the heated seats and all the other stuff that load the engine. Make sure your car is serviced properly. Roof boxes, roof racks, take those off. Take all the junk out the boot and just anticipate. And there's a trip computer on most modern cars. Use that, because that will tell you how many miles you're getting to the gallon, and then you can use that to improve it. And if you do it right, you can save up to 20% on your current fuel consumption by just driving gently.
OK, some really good advice there, Quentin, but we have to leave it there. But thank you very much for talking to us on the programme. Thank you.
Lots of talk about fuel prices on our Facebook page. A few of your views. Julie Lovell from Rootham in Kent says it was £1.79.9 for diesel at the Shell Rootham Heath garage yesterday, and you can bet it's gone up again today.
Samantha Anton from Ashford wrote to us to say, what do we all expect? Our government and fuel companies are greedy, she says. It's bound to increase further until the war in Eastern Europe is settled.
Thank you for getting in touch. TV presenter Louise Minchin has told ITV's Tonight programme of the threats made against her and her teenage daughter by a stalker that led him to being sentenced to more than 2.5 years in prison.
Well, figures show that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 10 men over the age of 16 experience harassment and stalking. In a new time slot of 8:30 tonight, Louise asks if enough is being done to tackle the crime, as Amani Khan reports.
To say I was frightened is sort of that just doesn't really touch the surface.
In the summer of 2020, Louise started receiving violent threats on her Instagram account. Her daughter Mia was the first to see it.
I'm logged into Mum's Instagram account and suddenly loads of messages started coming through, and they were all kind of just really offensive, like calling us not very nice names, and then they got much more graphic. So it was kind of actions that he wanted to do against me and Mum, which got really personal.
It was very clear from the messages that this person knew exactly where we lived and had stood outside our front door.
Mia screenshotted the messages and reported it to the police. Their stalker was eventually convicted in December 2021 and sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in jail.
I just didn't realise the kind of impact on my psyche that it had had until that day when I knew that he wasn't coming.
I feel much safer now, much safer.
Vanita Knoll, Tracy Kidd.
MP Jess Phillips is the Shadow Minister for Domestic Violence and Safeguarding. She's calling for a national stalkers register.
In my view, it is a form of terrorism and torture. If the idea to the public that a high risk of harm terrorist wasn't being monitored in the community, it'd be anathema to the police services. So why is it that we expect victims to be doing the burden of work in protecting themselves?
The Home Office says rather than bringing in a national register, they are improving current systems to better identify the risk perpetrators pose. Research shows that half of those convicted of stalking reoffend, and one NHS trust is trialling therapy sessions to help reduce that.
If the perpetrator has nothing else in their life other than the stalking's going to continue. So if you can actually put other positive things in a stalker's life, you can help reduce that behaviour. And the aim is to stop them stalking to protect the victims.
Louise wants to raise awareness and hopes her case proves that anyone who has been a victim of similar abuse is not alone, and stalkers can be caught and sent to prison. Amani Khan, ITV News.
You can see more from Louise Minchin, the truth about stalking tonight on ITV from the new time of 8:30.
Now, the ITV Evening News is, of course, on after us. With the details about what's on their programme this evening, here's Mary Nightingale.
Coming up on the programme, we will have the very latest on the horrifying situation in Ukraine. Also, Roman Abramovich is sanctioned. The Chelsea owner has his assets frozen with dramatic implications for the club. John Lewis warns of price rises as the cost of living crisis bites. Plus,
pass the baby. We got it.
The dramatic rescue of a toddler tossed from the top of a burning building. And we will be live with Craig David ahead of his fundraising gig for child victims of war. All of that ahead and plenty more, so do join me at 6:30.
Mary, thank you. Now, when it comes to fish, we have our firm favourites here in Britain, and they're not necessarily local or sustainable.
Well, as part of a new campaign to support the fishing industry in Kent and Essex, Fish Local are trying to introduce a new entry into our top 5 fish. And they've enlisted some young chefs to broaden our tastes. Tony Green reports.
The dishes of the day couldn't be much closer to home for these pupils at the Whitfield Academy in Dover. Part of a push to promote locally sourced and sustainable fish, they designed 2 dishes to tempt a tough crowd, their fellow pupils. On the menu, herring in a fish cake or a burger. One for fast food and one for posh nosh.
A lot of these children went over to even tried herring before, and it wasn't until last week or 2 weeks ago when these had the chance to play around with herring. And all the skills and that they've learned about deboning and filleting as well, and talking about food miles and sustainability. The way that the market is, the fish is caught locally, goes up to Billingsgate in London, UK, then it comes back down to the restaurant. So why does it need to go back up there? Let's cut the middleman out, let's keep the fish fresh, local.
Herring was chosen because there is a species unique to the Kent and Essex coast. Creating local demand could reduce food miles and tap into a sustainable resource.
Herring is not used, and we've decided, because of the sustainability at the moment, we're going to be using this fish to maybe make a product that can go out to restaurants and fast food.
Other students are filming the entire project.
We had a little workshop a couple of weeks back where we just learnt how to make documentaries, and we've just been studying documentaries for the last few weeks.
But also learning about fish.
Yep, we've been learning about this new fish and how we're trying to bring it into the top 5 popular fish.
Experts are on board to rebrand the fish and make it more marketable.
It's really important because there aren't that many species in Kent and Essex that the fishers can go out for that are really properly monetisable for them, and what we're really trying to do with this project is to add another species to that list. Who better than these kids to develop a dish for a fish and chip shop? You know, these are exactly the people we want to engage with the industry.
When the frying finished, it was time to dine.
We have packed lunches, which is just sandwich and crisps. So it was very different. It's very good. Yeah, I like it.
I like the fish ball, but I didn't like the burger as much. It's because I didn't.
They were so good, they were speechless.
They really were. I wanted to know what else they liked because I was getting in the mood for...
I was just feeling really hungry watching that report. Obviously a technical issue. Suffice to say, they all liked the fish.
Yeah, I'm going to try herring because we established during that neither of us
have. With chips, all good. Right, let's move on. Sugar beet farmers are backing the government's decision to allow the use of a pesticide which has the potential to kill billions of bees.
Well, the chemical was banned in 2018 because of the risks to wildlife, but warmer winter months mean crops are at risk of a deadly virus and may not survive without it. Amrit Birdie has more.
Research suggests 1 teaspoon of the pesticide thiamethoxam is toxic enough to kill more than 1 billion bees. It's banned in the EU, and it was banned here until earlier this month, when the government reapproved its use. For some bee lovers, this is bad news. David Wood is director of Kent Beekeeping Association.
It's a disaster for bees. The problem is that the seed dressings with the neonicotinoids, they leach off. They go into the ground and then eventually end up in watercourses. And this had a disastrous impact on wildlife.
Thiamethoxam does kill bees, but here what farmers really want is for it to kill aphids. These tiny insects are spreading a disease called Beets yellows virus that attacks and kills sugar beet plants. Campaigners say other methods should be used to control the spread of the virus instead.
We know that as a result of global warming, we are seeing increasingly warmer weather and warmer and wetter winters. Now these are perfect for the aphids, which spread the Beets yellow viruses, which is what this chemical is trying to control. But we know that there are alternatives available, and farmers are actively employing those alternatives now. Let's not forget that for the last 4 years, this chemical has not been used. So farmers have been using these alternatives.
The government says other pesticide and organic treatments that have been used over the last few years are not effective enough to control the virus on their own. They say their decision to approve an emergency authorisation was not taken lightly, but was based on scientific assessments. It's welcome news for many sugar beet farmers who've seen production down over the last few years, leading to fears more crops will need to be imported to meet demand.
There is cane sugar that's imported from the other side of the world, and that is grown with about 30 products that are banned here in the UK. So do we want to be importing products from the other side of the world, grown to a lot lower standards? 3 years ago, we had such catastrophic losses because of the virus yellows that myself here, I lost £55,000 in growing the crop. Didn't even break even, we lost money on growing the crop. Now, yes, we are all concerned with the environment and wildlife, but there has to be a balance with everything. What do we have to do to protect that crop from the attack of the aphids? We have to do something.
This authorisation is an emergency measure from the government and can be withdrawn at any time. There are strict limits on the amount of thiamethoxam that can be used, and no flowering crops can be planted nearby to try and limit the number of bees that will be in the area. Like so many things in nature, the ecosystem is a delicate balance. Amrit Birdie, ITV News.
Now for something that will keep the bees happy. It has really felt like spring has sprung today, and our parks and gardens are waking up after winter.
Yes, and nature is gearing up for her busiest season. At one location in Sussex, there are particularly spectacular displays of daffodils this year. Malcolm Shaw has been to Mitchelham Priory to find out why.
Shakespeare called it the flower that comes before the swallow dares. As a herald of spring, few blooms are more spectacular than the daffodil. At Mitchelham Priory, 80,000 are on show, the result of a huge planting session a few years ago.
They bring fantastic spring colour at this time of year, because before we planted them, it was mainly swathes of green, so it's really sort of lifted the garden at this time of year.
There are 18 different varieties of daffodils here, with subtle differences of colour, size and shape.
So this is one of my favourite daffodils. It's called Semper Avante, which means always ahead or always in advance, and it's got a lovely orange centre, as you can see, with the lovely creamy petals.
The priory dates back to 1229. In the medieval cloister garden grows Britain's only native daffodil.
We have a Narcissus pseudo-narcissus, also known as the Lent lily. It's a much smaller version and it's very much paler.
A mild winter has helped this year's crop of daffodils flower early. With luck, they should stay blooming for another 3 weeks. Malcolm Shaw, ITV News, Mitchell & Priory.
80,000 daffodils, 18 varieties there. How many can you name?
Misty Glen.
Misty Glen.
Because we looked it up earlier.
We looked it
I'm
up.
not going to cheat.
Dutch Master, Tate
Yeah.
Tate, Carlton.
Nice. Here's the weather with Sally.
Feels like home, whatever the weather. Valent Boilers and Heat Pumps sponsors ITV Meridian Weather.
Hello there, a very good evening to you. Hope you're keeping well and you've had a lovely day. The weather's not going to be quite as nice tomorrow. We have got some showery rain moving in as we go through the day. It's going to be a windier picture as well tomorrow. Into the weekend, well, the best day at the moment is looking like Saturday, a bit more unsettled for Sunday. I'll show you what's going on. As we go into Saturday, this area of low pressure is approaching us, so the wind's picking up as we go through overnight, and we'll probably get some heavy blustery showers on Sunday. But keep an eye on the forecast and we'll keep you posted. Right, back to tonight. Not too bad to end the day. Overnight, there'll be a mixture of some clouds, some clear spells, mostly dry, but the breeze picking up as we go through towards tomorrow morning. That'll keep us frost-free, and it won't be too cold to start the day, but it will be breezier. And make the most of the drier and clearer spells tomorrow morning, because as we go through the day, we're going to see more cloud moving in, bits and pieces of rain, quite patchy rain, and into the afternoon, maybe some heavier bursts as well. It's a windier day tomorrow too. Could see gusts of up to 35 miles per hour. So that will take the edge off these temperatures. Those highs of 11 to 12 degrees may well feel a bit cooler. And we can't rule out a few heavy showers into the evening as well. Here's the high tide times. Let's take Dover, 4:31 and 17:24. Now, here's your all-important outlook. So like I said, Saturday probably the best day of the weekend. Hopefully some brighter spells, but it will probably cloud over a bit as we go through the day. And the wind's picking up overnight into Sunday, when we could see those blustery showers I was talking about earlier. But you can see as we start next week, things calming down, and hopefully as we go through the week, the temperature's picking up a bit too. That's it for now. Have a lovely evening. Cheerio.
Valent sponsors ITV Meridian Weather.
Thank you, Sally. I'll be back with your late update just after 10:30. In just a moment, though, here on ITV, it's the ITV Evening News Hour with Mary Nightingale.
For now, though, from the team at ITV News Meridian, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.